right, this is going to be the recording for Traits in Reproduction, lesson 2.1. So we are starting chapter 2, and we are starting with a topic that has to do with hemophilia, which is a disease, and it is a genetic disease. So that means it's hereditary and passed down. And so today you can see the assignment, and then we're going to do a reading as well, and I'll show you that here in a second. So the first thing that you need to do in the assignment, if it wants to load, is you're going to see the warm-up has this picture of these two spiders. And you need to tell me down here why these two spiders make different proteins. So the spider on the left right here makes proteins that have high silk flexibility. And then the spider over here has low flexibility for its silk, but they're both the same spider. They're both a Darwin's bark spider. So why does the same species here make different proteins? And so you're going to explain that down here. And then the reading. So there is a reading which is linked here, and it will bring you to this reading, which is about hemophilia and how all those proteins connect and what hemophilia is. You can see it's all through here, so you're going to read that. And the tricky thing is that I'm not having you do anything in the Google Doc assignment for today. I'm having you do something in your notebook because I made the notebook before I started doing all these Google Docs for you. And so in your notebook for our lesson page for today, it has this section that it wants you to fill out. So tell me what happens when someone has hemophilia, and then fill in these blanks. And all this information will be found in your reading. And the main point, I tried to put this down here, but it might end up being more confusing. The main point is that your genes are your instructions. And so your genes tell your proteins what to do. They'll tell them how to come together, how to be structured. And then depending on how those proteins come together, that's how you get your different traits. And so down here, you can see the definition for gene. So you need to add this to your notebook in your chapter 2 homepage in your definitions. And like I just said, your genes are instructions for making the protein molecule. So you can think of your genes as like the instruction manual. And if you're building something like a dresser from IKEA or something, your genes are the instruction manual. Your proteins are like the parts, like the screws, nails, pieces of wood. And then your end result, your built dresser, would be like your trait. And so that's kind of that. And so then after you do the reading and fill in that page in your notebook, you'll see, you can scroll down here and you're going to see that there is a little sim activity. Remember, this is hyperlinked, so you can open that up. And today our main focus, if you haven't noticed, is that genes are the instructions for your proteins. And so we are going to play around in the simulation right now and get some evidence for that. And I'll show you here what that is whenever it decides it wants to load. I'll close a few things to see if that helps. There it goes. All right, so what you're going to see is that we're going to pick a spider. So I'll pick Zora, and then you're going to pick a feature. So let's do Venom. And we're familiar with a lot of the features so far. So we know that we have our spider name, the gender, we have the trait. And then what we're not familiar with is this little black box with these letters. And that's when we're going to come over here. And we know that we have our proteins down here, and the different proteins make up the cell. or not make up the cell, but are inside the cell. And we can see that inside this cell, we have all of protein 3. And so what we're going to do up here is these are known as the gene versions. And so for each trait, you get 2 genes. So you get 2 copies to make up your trait. And you get one from the mother and one from the father. And so over here, if I change this, so let's see, I'm going to make it V2. So it'll be V2 and V3. And you can see that over here, there's changes. And instead of being no venom, now it changes to be stunning. So it can stun. And also, I've noticed that now my proteins have changed too. I have some protein 2 and protein 3. And if I change this to V1, I can see that my trait has changed again. And so now this spider can kill. And I can see that inside I have protein 2 and I have protein 1. And so the idea that you're supposed to understand is that changing the genes is changing the instructions. So by changing these, I've changed which protein. So I'm instructing it to have protein 2 and protein 1. Because if you've noticed, the number over here relates to what proteins are inside the cell. So by changing the gene versions, I'm changing my instructions. And so then my proteins are then changing based on what my genes are saying. And so it's saying I need protein 2 and protein 1. And so that changed. By changing the proteins, I've changed the structure, which changes the trait. Genes tell proteins what to do. Proteins structure themselves and create different traits based on what proteins, what structure, how they connect, all of those things. Okay? So I'm going to close that. And so you can see that there are 2 questions based on the sim. And so the idea that you observe what happens in the cell when you change the gene versions. And remember, those are the numbers, the V2, V3, and all of those. And then do you think what you observed is evidence that genes are the instructions for protein? And so you're going to fill that in. So you'll fill in the sim and then the warm up on this. You'll do the reading and do your notebook page for the reading, which is right here. So that's that for this lesson.